Almighty God, just as our models imitate the beauty of your creation, may we imitate your kindness and generosity to us in our relationship with others. Bless us now and always. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Ron. We really do appreciate your contributions to our show. Now I want to turn to the sponsor for our show, which is Brennan's Model Railroading. Dennis Brennan.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
And now I'd like to turn to Bob Davidson to talk about our scholarship program a little bit. Bob, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim. Always a pleasure. Give just a brief recap about where we are and where we're heading here tonight. Last week we were down in Timonium for the April show, and things went very well. And thanks to Greg and to Steve for helping us out there. We've got a few more presences coming up. We'll be at the Midwest NMRA Regional up in northern Indiana this coming weekend. And then in June, we'll be at the ON30 meet in Harrisburg. And we'll also be at a show down in Florida, in Tallahassee, I believe. So in the meantime, please, as we keep saying, our biggest challenge here is right now is getting as many students as we can aware of the scholarship. We had a really nice session on Saturday with the Pacific Coast region group. Met a really wonderful young modeler, which was great. Unfortunately, he's just a freshman now, so we've got to keep this thing going for a few years so we can help him out. But he has some friends that he's going to talk to. And again, if you know of any young people who are in your group or come to the club, tell them about the scholarship. Tell them to go to the website and click on it. And if there's any questions, all they have to do is they can email Jim or myself or just the scholarship itself at ntmms@newtracksmodeling.com. And the more we can get the word out, the more successful this program's going to be. We've submitted a grant application to the Amherst Railroad Group, and we're hopeful for that for next year. So we're keeping busy. If any of you are interested in helping us on the committee, please get in touch. I'll put my email addresses up in the chat. And as Jim always says, we can always use the money. So please go to our website, click on the link, go to Zephy. 100% of your donation goes to the scholarship. There's no fees. We've kept our overhead costs to a bare minimum. The only thing that we've actually spent money on are checks and some shipping stuff for the banners that are going out. And we do have banners available. So if you have any events coming up, please get in touch. I can send you a banner. I can send you flyers. Anything we can do to help you, help us. So that's all I got to say tonight.
You know, I want to mention one other thing, Bob. I don't know whether you were here because this happened earlier before we started the show. But Chris Course, one of the manufacturers that attends a lot of the shows, said that he could really use something on an 8.5 by 11 that he could put behind the glass, plexiglass, that talks about new tracks, maybe has the QR code on it and so forth, because he talks to a lot of people about new tracks and finds that most of them haven't heard about it. And if he had something that with the QR code on it, then they could just go immediately to it and be able to log into our website and so on. So I suggested that he contact you directly because I felt that, you know, with all the banners and everything that you've done, you've got that information, that maybe
Absolutely.
you'd be the best person to maybe help Chris. Well, if Chris needs that, if there are other manufacturers out there that are finding that they are finding the same thing, that is, they mention new tracks and their scholarship to people, and people are ignorant about it, and they don't really have anything at hand that they can, you know, immediately say, well, you know, use your cell phone, click here, and you know, you get more information.
Right.
Then maybe if you'll also let us know, we can do the same kind of thing for you to make sure that you have the right amount of information and capability to talk about new tracks in our scholarship to people at the shows that might be interested. So I mentioned that to you, Bob, because hopefully you'll get some calls from other manufacturers too.
Absolutely. We have files set up. I have files set up for 8.5 by 11 and for poster size. So whatever you may need, we're here to help out.
Bob and,
Chris,
Yeah,
I'll
and
get
Bob, I
you
Jim,
don't
an
know whether
email
you
right
want to,
away.
Bob and Jim, this is
Bob, I don't
Phil.
know whether you want to mention our our test program that we're going to have.
Sure. Phil, did you want to, were you going to say something?
But yeah, I was just going to comment. You know, we made up a, call it for lack of a better word, an incentive bill. And I'll put this up in the chat. This is actually it'll be as a PDF. So basically, there are two sides to this. There's a front side. So you got to run it through your printer. If you don't have a two-sided printer, you got to take the paper and run it back through again. But it'll print this on the front side and this on the back side. So basically, it's, you know, a little bit about the scholarship on the front side. On the back side, there's a QR code and a link to the application. And the idea is to give those out to either students or to people to have them. If somebody says, hey, I know somebody, give them one of those. You can print a few up on your printer, few sheets of paper, cut them up, and it's a great way to pass something out that somebody can put in their wallet and give to a student. Because I think that's one of the things we do is people hear about it when they go to talk to someone, they don't have something with them. So I'll put that PDF file up in the chat if anyone wants to print it out. Just print a couple out, cut them up, and take them to your club and give them to the kids at your club and see if maybe they'll apply.
Absolutely. Yeah. Greg had some of those down in Timonium.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a front side to them. I had seen the back. You put it up online at one point, Phil, and I made a copy of it, and I printed out about 50 or 60 of those, cut them down to size, and they were popular at Timonium.
Fantastic.
A couple of kids who came by, and you know, you give them to the kid because they didn't want to be at the show, they didn't want to leave or something, and it would make their day.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Greg. Jim had mentioned we are going to start a little pilot program here at Al Judy's ON30 show in Harrisburg. And again, we'll thank Chris Course. Chris has donated 2 models for us to raffle off. They'll actually be raffled by new tracks by this show, but we're using that as a way to get people interested and excited, not only about new tracks, but also about the scholarship. So if you happen to be at the show, we're adding in a video element to our presentation at the big shows, and we're going to have these giveaways too, we hope. So we're doing what we can, and any help that anybody can give us would be most appreciated.
And I think this is going to go over very well. I really can't thank Chris enough for being the guinea pig to work with us to try to get the bugs out of this program before we expand it to other shows later this year. But some of the other manufacturers that I've talked to today really like the idea. They think it'll be beneficial to them, and they're all for it. So assuming that we can get it done at Al Judy's show as the test show, and Al has been very cooperative. He's allowed us to move the space that he was donating to us to where we have electrical hookup for the television and so forth. So that was very helpful. So it seems like it's on track. And again, I can't thank Bob and the other people on the committee for coming up with this idea and helping getting it implemented. I think it's going to be a help to us, and we really do appreciate it. I've got two other short announcements here that I want to make, and then have Chris talk about the My Bill coming up May the 22nd. Martin Breckbiel sent me an email today notifying me that Calback Corporation has sold all their magazines to a company called Firecrown Media that's headquartered in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the magazines involved are Classic Trains, Model Railroader, Classic Toy Trains, Fine Scale Miniatures, Astronomy, and then Calback's online stores are also involved in the sale. The Firecrown Media Group now has publications, I guess, in flying, planes and pilot, boating, yachting, and supply chain site freightways. So welcome to the new publisher of the Model Railroad publications that Calback used to publish. Now it'll be Firecrown Media. So I'm sure that we'll hear more about that in the future, but I did want to make sure that everybody had that information if they had not heard it yet. Also, to go back to what Bob was saying, the model that Chris, of course, is donating is his Gray Street Company house. And there'll be two separate kits of it that will be raffling off at the Al Judy show on the 7th and 8th of June of this year. The other announcement that I wanted to make, I'll just, we have a celebrity among us. At the convention Saturday night in California, Pacific Coast Regions Convention, one of our own, Phil Edholm, I heard he was named Man of the Year, but he says it was Member of the Year for that region. And congratulations, Phil. That's a real honor and well deserved for everything that you've done for the region that I'm aware of, at least. Running the convention this year as the co-chairman, being responsible for the virtual part of their convention, totally based I can understand it. And I think that everything that I saw with my participation in the virtual part of it, it was an outstanding job. So congratulations, and it's a well-deserved honor that they bestowed on you at that dinner. Well, with that said, and we'll be writing about this in the newsletter, assuming that we can get the title, that whether it's Man or Member of the Year, correct, and we can get Phil to send us a photo so that Martin can put it all in the newsletter. But we'll get it in the newsletter somehow, give you some more information about the honor that Phil got. Well, with that said, I'd like to turn to Chris and Greg to talk about the next My Bill coming up. So Chris, Greg, welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Actually, Greg will be hosting the next My Build, but I am still collecting the all the slides and all that, and I've got a few entries already. So whatever you guys are working on is greatly appreciated. And now we will go to our slides for the evening. Okay, first one. Okay, the next My Build is May 22nd. please have your photos to me by May 19th. It's a free-for-all. So whatever you guys are working on, whatever you've got stashed away, maybe it's Jack's section house. I'm working on it actually as we speak. I'm putting in some Tichy doors and windows on it. But anyway, so hopefully you guys can find some stuff to send. Please send it, and we'll have Greg host that for you guys.
And don't be shy. If you're camera shy and you don't really want to talk about it, send the photos in anyway, along with a little description of it, and we'll go ahead and take care of that part for you. We just want to see what you're working on.
Great. And then if this works. I don't think it did.
And the one after that is June the 19th. So we've got May 22nd is the one coming up, and June the 19th is the one after that.
Okay, here we go. All right, the next challenge is in June, and it is water. I just threw together some slides from stuff that I've got around here. So anyway, whatever you're working on or whatever you have that is water related, because that's, that's one of the big go-tos in the summertime is finding a beach or a lake or a pool or something to go hang out in. So the water challenge, waterfront buildings, wharves, boats, covered bridges, water tanks, anything water related. I threw the lighthouse on there. Because let's face it, that's you can't. There's really not a point to having a lighthouse if there's no water nearby. So, is there anything you want to throw in there, Greg?
No, but I've got something I'll be bringing in for both of them.
Alrighty. That will be on June 19th. Please have your photos to me by June 16th. It doesn't matter what month. If you want to go into July to another free-for-all, let's say you're not going to be around in May, but you have stuff for the free-for-all for July, I'll take that too. Whatever you've got, send it to me, and I will put it in a folder, and we will keep it until said time. So anyway, that's really all I had. So I'll see if Greg has anything further. If not, we'll pass it back to Jim.
Nope, I think you said it all, Chris. Thank you.
All right.
Well, Greg is going to be one of the people at the show on Saturday the 8th, manning our booth and helping us with new tracks and our television programs and so forth. So thank you so much, Greg. Stop by and say hello to him. And Chris is going to be one of the manufacturers that's also going to be at Al Judy's show on the 7th and the 8th. So make sure that you stop by his booth and say hello to Chris and see some of the great models that he produces. And thank him so much for donating the two models that NewTrack is using in our first test to see if this does help both the manufacturers and NewTracks increase our viewership for our show and also the people that contribute to the scholarship fund. So thank you so much, both of you, for everything that you do for NewTracks. We really do appreciate it. Well, with that said, I want to turn now to start the show. And our first segment is about O-Scale modeling. And the sponsor for it is O-Scale Central organization with David Vaughn as the president. So if we can run their video, please.
I'm David Vaughn of O-Scale Central. O-Scale 2-rail, models built to 1:48 scale and running on 2-rail track, is the best-kept secret in model railroading. We're pleased to team with Jim Kello to introduce O-Scale 2-rail to NewTrack's viewers. O-Scale 2-rail is for modelers. At twice the scale and 8 times the mass of HO, O-Scale's heft and ease of modeling create an outstanding model railroading experience. O-Scale 2-rail modeling is as varied as railroading itself. Modern era, transition or old time, standard gauge or narrow. A wide variety of models is available at affordable prices. There is a supportive community and lots of shows, clubs, and events. You can explore O-Scale 2-rail by going to our website, oscalecentral.com. You will find information about the scale and how to get started, as well as a free searchable scale-wide product and service guide and listings of coming O-Scale events. You will also find information about how to join O-Scale Central. We promote O-Scale 2-Rail and support modelers in the scale. When your eyes are going bifocular, when you need fresh challenges, keep O-Scale 2-Rail in mind. Check us out, oscalecentral.com. Thanks.
I've just got to get David to include traction in that. I mean, there's not many of us, I'll admit, but there's one or two of us around that do model O-Scale traction. Now I'd like to turn to the host for this segment of our show, Dave Schultz. Dave, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim, and hello, everyone. Tonight, we're going to discuss a little scratch building. Now, I know that scratch building is not necessarily an O-Scale thing. I've seen scratch built models in all scales, but it's one of those that kind of fits in with the price. You can scratch build something for literally $20 or less, depending upon what you're building. So first, because I'm old time here, I got to get my pictures lined up. So give me a moment here. Let's see here. What do we got going on? All right. Oops. See, I wish I could do two things at once, but I'm not that coordinated. So I got to do one thing at a time here. Okay. We should have it. So anyway, we'll start this show with just some of the basic tools for scratch building. I'm getting to the age now where the glasses in there are a must-have. Ever since I turned 40, I can't seem to focus in on real close. So got to have the glasses, but I have a couple of different X-Acto knives there, a ruler, and of course pencil. The red-handled X-Acto knife is for heavier material. I build a lot of my passenger car floors out of 60,000, so it takes a little bit heavier duty knife to get through that. And then a sanding block. You can even use like old emery boards. I find those at the dollar store and stuff on special, so I'll buy those. And then the two glues that I like to use for styrene is the CA or super glue, and then the Tenorx, and that the brush is there for spreading the glue onto these items. So next one, a few of the other items I like to do are the sanding blocks, different size sanding blocks. The two files, those are worn out. They hardly file anything. So what I did is I kind of dipped them in super glue to fill in the grooves, and I polished them off, and then I buy self-adhesive sandpaper and stick it to the file. And what's nice about that, those files are really stiff, so you can get into really narrow areas with them and still sand stuff easily. The two blocks on the lower left are blocks that I make to do the windows of my passenger cars. I happen to have a milling machine, so I'll glue plastic together, and then I will machine it so it's absolutely square, and then I'll round one of the corners, and that'll make the corner for the windows. And then you can use some pine blocks or some oak blocks. The one on the far right is just a piece of oak that I bought at one of the home centers. They sell, it's probably 1/2 inch by 2 inch wide, and they're maybe 8 foot long, and I'll chop those up into pieces, and I use those for sanding blocks. I can put different grades of sandpaper on there. So I've got 6 of those sitting by my side ready to go at any time. And then I buy styrene. Styrene isn't the only material. You know, people use plaster, they use styrene, they use wood, metal, brass. You know, the materials go on and on. My preferred is the styrene, which there's a hobby shop in the cities that I'll drive to, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they sell sheets of plastic that are about 12 inches wide by 24 inches long. So it's perfect for passenger cars. Since my passenger cars run around 22 inches in length, I can cut these pieces up into different strips. You can turn those strips into this. This is a scratch built car that I built a few years ago. The only part that the trucks, of course, and the roof are manufactured parts, and then some of the little vents and whatnot. But the floor, the walls, the ends, some of the battery boxes, the water tank, those are all scratch built out of styrene and glued together. And you can see the windows. I cut out the windows. Then I use those little sanding blocks which I've got a large square area to keep the windows square so I don't end up cutting one angle or the other. But that way I can get the corners rounded like these streamlined pasture cars would have in them. Anyway, these are kind of the strips that I start with. You cut them into whatever side. I'm sure you guys all have plans. That's always my biggest problem is the plans, trying to find the plans for certain items. And I've got projects that have been on hold for quite a while because I'm trying to find information on them. New pasture car came into my view. It was a Burlington car, little pasture car. It's about 40 foot. I'd never seen anything quite like it, but they used it on their branch lines. And I've asked around for information on this. I'd like to build it, but once again, the plans are few and far between. Here's what the sides look like when I get done cutting them out. As you can see, the one up above was some advertising from, I think I got those from a friend who worked at Walmart. All of the advertising signs that they had around the store were made on 20,000 styrene. So he'd pull those down and stack them up for me, and I'd come and collect them. He since then has retired, so my stack of free styrene's running out on me. But one of the things I like to do is when I get the sides cut, is I'll write the car number on there, and then I'll write things on it like which end is the vestibule end, which is the outside, which is the inside. Because believe it or not, I have glued sides together and then realized I got them backwards. So something to write, and the beauty of styrene is it's easy to write on it. I used a black marker, but and there's a floor that I've laid out. Before I glue all this on there, I'll take a square and I will draw out all of the, the center lines for all of the ribs, it makes it so much easier than going along trying to square everything up on short pieces. So I'll draw the lines on the whole floor, and that way when I get the center sill in, then I can put all the rest of the floor bracing underneath and get the bolster set in place and the like. Like I mentioned before, you don't have to use styrene. You can use any kind of material you want. That's the beauty of this. I had acquired some kits that a guy was building that he had started making wood floors. He bought some thin plywood paneling and had them varnished and sand and sealed. And I happened to get this in a estate sale that I bought out. And so I've started using some of the floors, but once they're painted, it's tough to tell that they were wood. He had really done an excellent job, but kind of the same effect there. Another thing that's kind of important in scratch building are squares, keeping everything in square, because when the glue is dry and pieces tip one direction or another. So the squares way off to the left there, I purchased those at Micromark, and they have come in very handy because not only are they square, but they're really heavy. So they're nice for holding things down and for holding pieces in square. And then the little table in the middle, or on the right side, is one of those tables with the magnets, and those come in handy for any kind of modeling, buildings, or anytime you got a floor that you want the wall to be square, you can line that stuff up and put those magnets in place to hold them there while the glue dries. So I find all of this stuff handy, and then the little square there helps me draw out the floors and dividers on the pasture cars like this. This is the beginning of this. A couple of bathrooms in one of the pasture cars, and I use that little squaring jig to hold these pieces in place while they dry. And the square blocks and such hold all that stuff good and square. When these pieces are removable for now, but when the car is done, I will glue them in, and that helps to hold the walls in place also. But just pieces of styrene just glued together, and then I spray paint them kind of an almond color. Because pasture cars were always done in light colors to spread the light around. And here's another car that I'm building that it's a commuter car. So you can kind of see the carcass itself. And once again, using a lot of squares, a lot of super glue, hold all that stuff together until I get the sides glued on. There's the cab end of it. I like detail. So I sat down one day and I decided, okay, we're gonna make the control stand here, and it's hard to get pictures of it nowadays. But I built the brake stand, I built the throttle, I built the radio and the speedometer in there, and put the chair in, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of hours, which is kind of a proof of a severe behavioral disorder. here will be the sides that I built. Now that's once again just a big sheet of styrene. I cut out everything that didn't look like commuter car, and I had to make a special block for sanding out those windows because they're much narrower than standard passenger car window. But I've got the side painted, so this will go on that cab car. You can see the window on the far right for the engineer. But I'm getting pretty close to putting that together. Here's a little trick that I learned, which is kind of interesting. You got a sheet of styrene and you want to mark some of the spots, maybe where you're going to cut. Well, what I'll do is take a ruler, lay it on there, and I'll lightly scratch the plastic. And you can't even see it on here. But what you'll do is take a pencil, rub it on a piece of sandpaper, get the graphite going, rub your finger in the graphite, and then just smear it across, and you can see the scratch marks where you left the lines. This is really good for if you're drilling holes and you got a crosshair. You don't have to gouge deeply into the model. You can just scratch a light line, use a little graphite on there, and it'll highlight that. And then you can look at it through magnifying lens or whatever and get the drill bits set perfectly and get a hole drilled in there. But here's some pictures of some stuff my son and I have scratch built over the years. This is a steam heat car. He models the Milwaukee Road out in Avery, Idaho, which had all electrics. None of the electrics had steam heat in them. So the passenger trains would have to come with a steam heat car. The Milwaukee Road took old steam locomotive tenders and they'd convert them into steam heat cars. And of course, it made a real easy scratch build because when the Milwaukee rebuilt these cars, they removed all the rivets. They wanted a smoother look, more rounded look to match the passenger cars. So my son decided he needed one of these and he built this entire car. The trucks, he purchased the couplers, of course, and a few things like hoses and the ladders. But the rest of the car is all scratch built. I think he took first place in Chicago with this one. And then this is a peekaboo gun that he built. He's got like 4 of these going. And the angle, the gussets in there are purchased pieces. But the rest of the car, everything white, is styrene that he scratch built himself and makes a real interesting car. The Milwaukee Road took composite guns and removed everything so you can see if the car is loaded or not. And I don't remember the whole story behind them, but they got odd ends to them. They've got, they're 45 or 50 foot cars. Really interesting. He's got about 4 of those complete, but that's what it looked like when he was building. The car next to it is just a flat car that AHM built some really cheap flat cars that don't really represent anything, but they're 40 foot. Well, he took and scraped off all the stake pockets because the Milwaukee did that. They removed the rivets, once again, welded everything, and then they built these bunks on the car to hold logs. And he's got about 5 or 6 of those now, but the bunk there is 3D printed. And this is a RPO car that he built. The Milwaukee Road, of course, had their own shops. They built everything themselves. And so they had some really, really odd cars. They'd take them in and they'd modify them however it needed to be modified to serve their purpose. Well, there's half a dozen of these different RPOs and baggage mail express cars and such. So he's taken upon himself to build them. Now, this is actually more of a kit bash. He uses the Walthers kits and uses most of the parts in there, the roof, the floors, but he builds his own sides so they can have the car that he wants. So he's got a rather unique piece there with these. And here's another mail storage car that's unpainted yet, but soon to be. And then another one, this is the RPO painted and finished up. And then last but not least is one of my cars. This is another scratch build other than the roof and the trucks. One that I built. It's got a full interior in it. And but you don't end up spending a lot of money on this stuff. Now, I really enjoy scratch building. It's one of my favorite things. And I know Jim agrees with me on this. He loves to scratch build too. He does a lot of his stuff in brass, and I admire that greatly. But the thing I see that, as scratch builders are kind of few and far between anyway, and then 3D printing comes along, and I don't have a problem with 3D printing, but I see it just putting another nail in the coffin of scratch builders, because if you can 3D print the stuff, why build it? So I think scratch building's in a bit of a danger, but I find great satisfaction out of all the models that I build. So If you've never scratch built before, it's kind of fun. You're probably going to throw a couple models away or cut them apart again and have to redo them. But when you finish a project, it really is gratifying. So I recommend you give it a shot. Anyway, that kind of concludes this week's show, or this month's show, I should say. So any questions?
Anybody
Well,
have
if not-
questions for Dave?
Dave,
Good
what
enough.
kind of paint do you typically use when you're painting one of the cars?
Well, I'll prime them first. You got to wash the styrene because they have some kind of oil on them. So I'll wash them first with soap and water, and then I'll prime them with just I go to any of the auto parts stores and buy an automotive sandable primer, and I'll spray that on there, and that'll show you all the scratches left behind by your careless sanding and cutting and whatever else. So you can kind of go over it with the sandable primer and go over it with about a 400 grit paper to smooth them out. And then I use either scale coat, but since scale coat, well, I see they're coming back now, but my scale coat supply is run dangerously low. So I've moved over to True Color, which is a little different to use True Color, but I've had some pretty good success, but it goes against everything you were ever taught. Scale coat, you usually hold the airbrush probably around 6 or 8 inches away, where True Color, you got to be within 2 or 3 inches. Otherwise, you're in danger of the stuff drying in midair and you're not getting a shiny finish to it. So, but those are the two paints that I enjoy the most.
All right. Well, it looks good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Well, Dave, thanks so very much. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Oh, we'll see what we can come up with next. I'm kind of shy of subjects to talk about, but I'll find something.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so very much. Well, now I want to turn to the next segment, which is O-scale high rail. Some even call it 3-rail modeling. But from my standpoint, modeling is modeling. How many rails the track has doesn't make any difference. The sponsor for this segment is Millhouse Studio. So if we could run their video, please.
Millhouse River Studio builds model train working accessories that are made to last generations. Millhouse River products are built out of aluminum and have scale brass details that even the most demanding scale modeler will appreciate. Since our industry entry in 2009 with the introduction of our flagship turntable, Millhouse River has continued to add new, innovative products, like our scale transfer table, rotary coal dumper, flood coaling tower and, most recently, a working conveyor that transports coal from the dumper to the loader. All of Millhouse River Studio's stunningly realistic products are currently available in O-scale. We are adding new scales on some products, including the upcoming release of an HO scale turntable featuring our aluminum construction and stunning brass details that is big enough to handle a big boy locomotive. When it comes to your layout, don't settle for less, get Millhouse River Studio.
They really do have some fantastic products. Well, now I want to introduce the host for this segment, Dennis Brennan. Dennis, welcome.
Hi, guys. Hi, Jim. Thank you. David, that was a perfect lead-in for what I'm about to talk about tonight. And this is craftsman kit building. Okay, so exactly what is a craftsman kit? I think most people know. Craftsman kits require you to basically have a degree of building skills. And a craftsman kit, here's a view of craftsman kits right here. These are what I call traditional craftsman kits. And by traditional craftsman kits, I mean that they've been around for over 70 years. And typically you went from scratch building into craftsman kit building. And what's the difference? Well, scratch building, Dave pretty much showed it to you and explained it. Craftsman kit building, the plans are already there. And all the pieces are already there. So that you got the plans, you got the pieces, and then you get you get the plans consist of templates, usually full-scale templates. You take all the pieces out of the box, and here's a typical kit. This is the Glorcraft Freight House.
Dennis, we don't see anything on screen, I don't think.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Share screen. Screen 1. Is that not showing up?
No.
Is that there?
There it is.
There it is. There it
Okay.
is.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I will go back to the very first slide. These are typical Craftsman kits. We've got Evergreen Hills design, Glorcraft models, Suncoast models. Those date back to I think 70s and maybe 80s, and not much has changed during that time. What they basically are kits that look like this. You open up the box and see a bunch of parts that make no sense unless you put it together. That's a Craftsman kit, or at least that's a traditional Craftsman kit. And as you can see, you get a minimum of instructions, written instructions. That's it, that whole sheet right there. And then you have full-scale diagrams, templates that basically you build on top of, where you take your measurements from. And that's pretty much how it went. And these, so these are the kits. Here's a close-up detail of the Suncoast models, Yard House kit. And that pretty much shows you built the windows. You put all the siding on, strip by strip. And then as the years progressed, we got more sophisticated with resin kits and plaster kits. Now, resin kits and plaster kits made things somewhat easier in that you had the basic 4 walls and possibly the roof, but you had to still and you may have even had windows that were either cast lead, which was also available in some of the basswood kits that you saw before, or plastic. Now plastic was injection molding started and got popular after World War II. So these kits are probably from the 80s. And one of them is a plaster kit. That's a Tom York's building, but you had to build that turret right there. You had to put that together and make a jig for it, and there were some other things you had to do. That's definitely Craftsman work. And then Highland Station, same kind of thing. You had to build several pieces for it. Like I think you had to put the whole roof together and all of the woodwork on the sides of the building. And then the Berkshire Valley resin kit, the walls are there, but that whole loading dock platform and stuff, you had to build that, and there were plans for it. So now we'll say, so what's the difference? How are Craftsman kits different today, or are they? Well, now we have laser cuts. Okay, we have laser cutting, and laser cutting pretty much has everything cut out for you, typically in the size that you need, and the walls are all cut and sized. The windows are in them, and you may have to put windows together, but the 4 walls are pretty much cut for you. But there's still quite a bit of work. So what do they all have in common? Well, what they have in common is that they all require you to have a certain skill set. Now, whether it's a simple kit or a complex kit, because they range from simple to complex. Some are like a little guardsman shack at a railroad crossing, might be 4 walls and a roof and a window and a door. Pretty simple to put together, but they still probably require you to have some skills like and tools like Dave was showing you. So they're basically more than any Craftsman kit today is more than 4 walls and a roof. They do require you to have a skill set, like I said, and most of the problem that people encounter is because the instructions are not as clear as you might think. For a veteran modeler, okay, but for somebody who's just starting out, they're going to be maybe intimidated because they don't know where to start. They can read, but it's like anything else. You have to develop a skill before you can, before you're comfortable doing anything with it. Well, usually people learn skills by either apprenticing with somebody or having a friend come over and help them. And so I think the manufacturers, some of them anyway, are kind of lacking with that in their instructions are not teachable instructions. And by teachable, I mean, they should show you how to do everything. And mine do. And I have to, I have to talk about that because I show you not only what tools to use, but I give you complete photographic illustrations and complete descriptions of what's involved in building the kit. So I don't leave anything to your imagination. Now, if you're a veteran modeler, there's more than one way to do something. But I show you how I do it, and I know it works because I build the kit using these methods. I wouldn't tell you to do something if it wasn't something I did myself. And there's another one. I explain a sequence. I explain, point out little details that you could miss if you're not very careful. I tell you what products I use and how to use them. And I show you the tools as well, like a glass cutting board with a square, a carpenter square taped to it. Why do I do that? Well, glass cutting board provides a perfectly flat surface for building on. And the carpenter square, well, it gives you a perfect right angle. And then I also use machine squares, which help keep things vertical. I use 1, 2, 3 blocks. I don't have a picture of one of those there, but you can look that up if you don't have one. These are all great tools. A lot of these are available at like MicroMark, or you can just get online and look for a particular tool and see if you can find it through Amazon or eBay. But MicroMark has a lot of stuff. At any rate, that's basically the end of my slideshow here. And if there are any questions, give me a holler. Anybody have a question?
When Dennis and I first started talking about this presentation he was going to make tonight, one of the things that we discussed was the survey that I did when I asked modelers, what really makes a great kit for you? What is there about the kit that when you finish it, you can say, yeah, that was really a great kit? And the answer that I got back consistently was the instructions. If instructions were great, that made the kit. If I had trouble building the kit because of the instructions, or I just didn't have the skills and the instruction didn't help me, then that kit was not one that I would be interested in buying again. So down to the instruction. And when Dennis and I were talking and he started telling me his definition of a Craftsman kit and trying to explain to me the purpose behind some of the work that he puts into his instructions, what came through loud and clear to me is a modeler gains skills two ways. He gains the skills with a mentor that may live close to him that he can go by and talk to and see and have over to his house and help him build the model. Or he can rely on the manufacturer whose kit he bought. And in that way, the manufacturer becomes not only the seller of the kit, he becomes the mentor to help the modeler gain the skill necessary to successfully complete his kit. And so, to me, that corresponds to why people say the instructions are what makes a great kit. The manufacturer, in effect, through his instructions and the way he prepares them and the detail he goes into, becomes the mentor for that modeler. And I had not realized that until Dennis and I really talked about it for probably 2 hours one afternoon. But I'm firmly convinced of that now. And I do think that it really goes back to the importance of the instructions the manufacturer puts in his kits, whether the modeler is going to really have a pleasant learning experience as well as building a great kit. So Dennis, thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome, Jim. Thanks for that. I try to do as best as I can. I take more time doing instructions, writing instructions, and photographing the pieces for them than I do in actually putting a kit together. It's that important to me, and I want people to have fun. That's what the hobby is all about. If you enjoy something, you're going to do it again. And I feel like I'm a teacher. So thanks for the opportunity to let me ramble on here. But I'm always available. If anybody ever has any questions about anything that I can help with, feel free to give me a shout.
Dennis, have you ever thought about putting instructions online?
I thought about it and I've decided not to. I put so much work into my instructions. I just worry about once they get online, some people just think that they own stuff, right? And I just don't want to do that. For maybe lots of other reasons too. But why is that important?
No, I know that most manufacturers do not do that. Only one or two that I'm aware of post instructions online. And I can, where some of my own kits that are very, it's like small kits, I end up writing 8 pages of instructions. And they say, well, I can't put 8 pages of instructions into a tiny kit. So I end up skinning them down, so there's some compromise involved with, how many pages of, do you want to put into a small kit in terms of packaging and whatnot? Doesn't make any sense after a while.
Mm-hmm.
So
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Well, I spend a lot of time and I spend a pretty good penny on putting the instructions, printing them and, of course I'm a professional photographer, so I don't have any cost associated with that except my time. And that's a love. So that's not an issue for me, but that's a problem for many manufacturers, I think.
Well, I know a lot of people don't want their instructions copied, and they don't want, with all due respect to the scratch builders, they don't want people taking their plans and just scratch building off of the plans that they've taken off the internet. So
yeah, exactly. And there are those people out there that would do that. So, I don't do it as a rule. In fact, I don't send things over the internet to people. Somebody says, oh, I missed something. I'll send it through the mail. I won't send it electronically. If it's a page that's missing or something, I'll just send it through the mail.
Interesting. Oh, good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, with that, then thank you, Jim. And thanks for everybody listening. And I will see you next month. I'm not sure what we'll be doing then, but as Dave said, I'll figure something out.
Dennis, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, now Jack was the one that was asking the question, so now I'll turn to Jack, who owns Ipswich Hobbies, for his build along of his section house, where he is being the mentor to you on how to build this. Jack, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I've got my, let's see, I need to, from the beginning, I think. There we go.
Jack, this is your final segment on this build along, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
In any event, thank you, gentlemen, especially those who have participated along the way. We talked about, making a plan and wall bracing and floors and priming, staining, and all the rest that goes in to a craftsman kit build. Thank you, Dennis. Good introduction. I made a note during your presentation. I'm thinking, well, Dennis Brennan will probably be talking about Ipswich Hobbies and Conowingo models in 70 years from now. But here in part 4, we're going to finishing up. We're finishing up, and we'll take a look at putting the roofs. As you recall, we went vertical last week. Roof trim, rafter tails, all those good things we'll be chatting about for a few minutes. The roofs that I have are almost all cardstock, and of course we're talking about the section house build here in N scale, HO, and O scale. This particular model is based on a prototype, and that prototype had a smoke jack that was right in the center of the apex of the roof. So, and the cardstock roof has a crease in it, so it's easy enough to see where that fold goes. You measure that beginning, and you put a hole right in that center of the roof, the cardstock piece, and then you expand that. Use your knife to expand that to make sure the smoke jack is going to fit there. The photograph in the bottom right, you can see there's a ridge beam. Not all my kits have ridge beams, but it's simple enough to put one in on your own with some scrap lumber, scrap strip wood. But the point here is just carve a flat spot in the center so that your smoke jack has a place to, a good gluing surface, has a place to sit if you've got a roof beam. And some of the kits where I have a chimney elsewhere and it's not convenient, it's not sitting on a roof beam somewhere, I'll use, a brass tube or something, and sometimes I'll bring it all the way to the floor inside the structure just to make sure that that chimney or smoke jack doesn't get knocked off. And that top left-hand photo, that's the underside of the shed roof on the addition. And that's just illustrating some bracing that I'm putting in there just to make sure that cardstock does not warp over time. And that top right photo is the top version of the cardstock roof of the main structure, and then just a few pieces of the rolled roofing. This kit, all 3 of the scales has rolled roofing to it, and that's simply just black construction paper that has been pre-sliced, but you can cut up any piece of black construction paper to make a road roofing. And you'll notice that going back down to the photographs on the left, you want to make sure that you've painted the edges of the roof and whatever edge might overhang and potentially be seen in the completed model. If you're looking down on the models, as most of us do, you're probably not going to see underneath the roof overhang anyway. But if it's a higher up, a hillside, or even a second deck or a third deck on your layout, you're going to see the underside of the overhang. So you want to make sure that you don't have any rock cardstock or raw wood showing. And let's see, I think that's takes care of that. So the next slide, we got the rolled roofing. You see, I'm just illustrating a few applications here. You can bring this all the way over, which I did in the N scale version of this, or you can cut them into segments. In theory, according to the architectural websites that I've looked at, you typically have vertical application on the rolled roofing, whereas on the horizontal slope, like on the addition to the section house, it's often horizontal. I don't think anybody's going to scold you if you do it incorrectly in terms of the vertical versus horizontal, but I'll try to go with that since that's what the internet tells me is the right way to do it. I use a glue stick or double-sided tape for my applications. If you're into a shingled structure, often those shingles come with an adhesive backing. Again, going with the belt and suspenders approach, I use two-sided tape or a glue stick anyway, even with an adhesive back shingle. Roof trim. You can see here that well, you don't see the prototype, but the prototype that you have seen in previous sessions, there were 6 of these, like what I call spacers between the top trim, lost it, and the outside piece of roof trim. So those 6, got a sensitive touch here. Those 6 spacers, I just used a piece of 3x5 card and just measured them equidistant, drew some pencil lines in the roof frame, as you can very faintly see in that top left-hand photograph. And just glued those 6 and trim off the edge. And as you can see in the bottom photograph, it's a nice clean look that probably nobody will ever see once the building is on the layout, but I know it's there and it looks good. You'll see here too that the photograph will show all kinds of sins. Here I didn't paint the underside of the windowsills, so I should have done that. I popped in my window in the loft area just a tad, but I was able to pull that out. So that's an easy repair that I was able to take care of. Rafter tails, similar here. Sometimes you can get templates for rafter tails that might be 16, 20, or 24 inches apart. Here I had a prototype to work with, so I counted the rafter tails that were exposed on the front. And so I just made this template, drew 15 equidistant lines, transferred them to the top of that wall, and then I glued and cut away. I used my sprue nippers to, some people use toenail clippers, but I used sprue nippers to trim down to the these rafter tails get a nice neat appearance from the side. You want to make sure you paint the ends of the rafter tails after you cut them off. Smoke jack and vent. This particular kit had, as I mentioned earlier, the smoke jack that was right in the middle of the roof at the apex. And I dull coated this first. You can paint a primer. It's just a piece of plastic. It's resin, actually. It's 3D printed. So I use dull coat. You can also use a primer. Then paint it. The prototype looked like it was a light gray or silver, perhaps a galvanized type of metal that was all rusted. And I've seen them black and in gray. No other colors, just those 2. Down below, and we spoke about this, I think it may be the first session even, that we're guessing is a vent where we're guessing that the potbelly stove went away at some point in the 100-year life of this structure and was replaced with some other heating appliance, such as a propane stove inside. And so we're, another historian and I at Boston and Maine Railroad, we're guessing that that was an exhaust vent for that propane stove. And that comes just as 4 different pieces that becomes a sandwich. You just glue one over the other. It gives you some depth to it. And paint that gray. Doesn't show up here, but that's kind of a gray. And note that I was surprised that it was near the window, frankly. But not only is it near the window, it's not directly under the center. It's kind of offset. So strange location in my view, but I'm sure they had a reason for putting it there. Added details. I used pan pastel weathering powders quite a bit, virtually every model now. I have a drawer full of probably 2 dozen chalks that I have scratched and scraped and turned into dust in tiny jelly jars. And I haven't used them, I don't think, in 3 or 4 years since I started using the pan pastels. And these are not with the kit, but I just decided on at least the O scale, since that they show up better. I added a few, crates and barrels, and these are Tichy crates that I put together. There's a couple of pallets. I think those are Tichy pallets. And I forgot where I got these, but I have a bunch of those that I put in some of my kits. And it's just a stack of crates with a few cans of whatever, paint or something on top of them. And I glued that to the floor so that in my open door, the only kit of these 3 that I had an open door on was the O scale. So if you look on the O scale door, you can see something inside. And I want to note here that some of the stuff that I have, like these wooden barrels and some of these crates, these are HO scale. I said, what the heck, and there's a bookcase that I put inside that right in the back on the floor that doesn't show in the photographs. I said, what the heck, bookcases come in all sizes and crates come in all sizes. So I'm primarily an HO scale modeler. I'm limited on the O scale details that I have, the detail parts. So I just experimented and threw in, and it looks pretty good in the face model. This long, skinny photograph at the very bottom of the page, that's a ridge cap. And what I did here is I just took a piece of styrene angle and just cleaned up the top edge of the roof a little bit. Some folks will just put in a like a square piece of strip wood or a square piece of styrene and use that as a ridge cap. I typically would use the styrene angle. And it doesn't apply in any of these section house kits, but I use the reverse side of that and use them as channels. If I have for example, a residential building that has a gable that's coming out from the main part of the roof, that way I'll have a nice channel that hides a seam where those 2 pieces might be on a different type of roof. And of course, always remember pigeon droppings. You got to sprinkle a little bit of white here and there. I didn't have any O-scale birds, so there's none on my roof. Completion. These are what my finished kits look like under this exercise. Of course, as a manufacturer, I build each of my own kits in order to write instructions. For this exercise, I found it interesting. I built each of the kits over this past several weeks. And you'll see that the differences here. You got the O scale in the top row, middle is HO, the N scale on the bottom. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the O scale or the N scale, but I'll figure out a friend who's an N scaler or an O scaler and find a new home for those. And maybe they'll be on my for sale table at the Ella Judy June show. Now, the HO version, I'll find a place for that on my own layout. Some customer builds. Cyrus on the top left built this one over here. And you can see one thing I'll point out here, he has his speeder door, his little freight door here on the left bottom. He has the that kind of horizontal. The board should be vertical. Maybe he's modernized it and he's created a roll-up door to it. I don't know. But maybe that's an illustration where, illustrates one of Dennis's points where, just have a photograph or be explicit on as much as you can on thorough instructions. Sometimes if we build a lot of models, maybe we take things for granted that beginners won't understand that, the boards are vertical. Tom C has this one here on his layout. Well done. It looks nice. He's just going to put some detail around it and scenic that area, and he'll have a good looking shed. The bottom left is Bill Davis's. You might have seen that in the Old Scale magazine a couple of years ago. I visited Bill, been over his house a couple of times. I took some pictures over there. So Martin, don't worry, I'm not impinging on anybody's copyright. Those are my own photographs. But I want to point out a couple of things here that Bill did. First of all, he added the ridge cap that I mentioned earlier on some other models, but he did the, you've heard of board and batten before. These are the battens. And so instead of a grease mark or a light black pen mark at the seams, Bill actually added battens to his old scale version of this kit. And Bill also changed the shed roof on the addition. He added some corrugated metal. And you can see down here, he's got it all rusted. So he did a little bit of super detailing on his roofs. Looks good. And top right, I need to make that go away. Yeah. Top right, John is not finished with his model, but it's looking very good. He added a little bit of extra bracing on his roof. As you can see, he's got the ridge beam and he's got the smoke jack already positioned on there. Looks like he's already got it glued on. But you can see here, he's got this extra piece of support. Most likely he did it on the other side that doesn't show in the picture. He also has put some window shades in from the inside. That's common. I know some guys like to paint their windows. I generally have resorted to painting myself. Using the manila folder or some other type of shade gives you a cleaner look probably than painting. I know sometimes I have to paint 2, 3, 4 coats before I get a good coverage over that window. And you have to be perfectly straight, so you need to mask that when you do it. I also want to point out, it doesn't show well here, but here it is. If you look at the front, way up top, about the second or third clapboard down from the top of that front wall on John S.'s model, he matched perfectly the single board that was lifting out of the prototype photograph that I showed everybody in the week number 1 of the build. So hats off to John for having done that. And Mr. Greg down here in the bottom right, he's decided that he's going to have an open door and he wanted to have a full stud wall detail on the inside. So he's coming along very nicely on his wall, interior walls. So looking forward to seeing Greg's completion. And we've got some other folks that are still working on theirs and some finished, but they won't get the photographs to me until a bit later. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I thank you all who participated. We had surprisingly good participation with this kit build. So we had folks in all three scales, N, H, O, and O. Any questions?
I have a
Jack, I think,
comment.
yeah, please.
The comment is actually, it's sort of a question. Don't you just love it, Jack, when people take your building and add their own touch to it?
I do, and I also want to point something out. I modeled Boston and Maine, and I'm a craftsman kit builder more than a scratch builder. And I have the maroon and cream Boston and Maine colors. This particular shed prototype was a gray with white trim. Aside from the section house, almost all of my other kits, of all the ones that I've seen on layouts and customer builds, very few of them model what the prototype looks like. So it's all very creative. Sometimes the full walls, the roof, all look the same, but they all have their own color schemes, whether it be fictional or
Sure.
or anything else. But it is great. I love it.
Yeah, I do. I love that too.
Jack, thank you so very much. You proved our point. You're a fantastic mentor to an awful lot of modelers. The way that you talk about building your models, the examples that you show, it couldn't be clearer. So thank you so much for participating in this. I hope you had a good time.
I did, Jim, and I used to teach real estate at BU, and it's true that if you teach, you learn as you go along. So doing this segment, first time I've done it on the show, although I've done several clinics, I learned something every time from the participants. And so I appreciate that too.
Thanks again. Thanks so very much. And best of luck at Al Judy's show.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, now I want to turn to Tom Ferrell, who, as we all know, is scratch building his complete layout. So Tom, looking forward to what you're building tonight.
Thank you very much for having me this evening, and I always appreciate being on the show. This evening I have a scratch build, of course, and second here, call it up. This is the Fort Pitt Brewery, Part 6. This is located immediately to the right of my Turtle Creek Depot and the water tower that I featured in previous shows. I'm going to show you how I scratch built this large structure. It's actually from Fort Pitt Brewery. Was a major brewery in Pittsburgh back in the early 1900s all the way to 1957. These are some of the logos, some of the advertisements from Fort Pitt beer. Next week, I'll feature one of these pieces of artwork, not the can, of course, but one of these 3 pieces in a billboard that will be next to the brewery. This brewery I actually completed back in 2018. So this is what I'm going to show you how I built today. It's a complex scratch build. It's a really impressive model because of its size. It took quite a bit of time, and it was a turning point in my modeling. Prior to this, prior to 2018, I would typically draw things in CAD, a program called TurboCAD, and then I would work off my own drawings. Then I said, you know, I don't really feel like drawing things up in CAD anymore. I'm just going to start scratch building without any plans. So this was really the first major structure that I made without any plans, just right out of my head. And the idea was to start with this core building in the middle and then show as the business expanded, it added things like the shed to the right and this building to the left and this steam house to the left. So they're all different materials. And I'll show you, because I did this way back in 2018, I don't have a complete set of build photographs. It's not too bad, but you'll get the idea. So this was the first section, was the middle section. And what made this interesting is this wainscoting that I put on here. This is and this is a shipboard siding here. I used to use that a lot for decking materials. And my trademark using 1/4-inch material to strengthen the building, so you're not going to get any warpage. I did start with a piece of plywood, like all my models, and this is what I brought forward from this particular model. Is everything is basically sketched out on a piece of plywood. And in this case, I said I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings. I'm going to start with the earliest building, the core building, and go from there. There's another view of it. There's absolutely no possibility this is ever going to work. This is 1/4-inch material. I used Mount Albert clapboard siding. And then I ran one of those pounce wheels up the side of the siding to simulate nail holes. I continued the wainscoting around the base of the building. I trimmed it out with a 1x6. This is the first floor roof. You'll see where this detail goes, but this is all super glued. This is a piece of birch plywood. Goes right on the roof here. I pre-painted it. Here I test fit a Grant Line double door. There's the heavy plywood, aircraft grade plywood. It's all trimmed out. That looks a little sloppy there. I'm sure I filled that in. See how I channeled this to fit out around the door trim? Little nice detail there. Same here. Relieve that so it would fit nicely around the trim. Another trademark of mine is I paint the inside black. So if you look through the windows, you don't see anything because I don't normally do details on the inside. There's the floor in preparation to add the beginning of the second floor. You can see the pounce wheels here. This piece of trim covers up the 2 pieces of Mount Albert siding. Now I added a bump out here with clapboard siding. And this is all trimmed out. Again, there's no plans. This was just winged it step by step. I had an idea what I wanted this thing to look like. And I just kept plugging away at it. There's the second floor is almost complete at this point. This is the core building. More of the 1/4-inch material. This way it'll withstand any bombing that I might have at the house. More photos. There's a close-up. So this is all super glued together. And there's looking down at it. Now I'm adding the roof material, the roof bracing. Again, it's 1/4-inch material. And now I've added the second building. So the concept is this is what the brewery started at. And then as they expanded, they went to the left here. because it was done at some period later, it's a different material. So this is a vertical, different clapboard siding than this clapboard siding. These are all different materials. And same construction. Now here's a big jump. Now I have the shed to the right. I have the steam house to the left. I constructed a scratch-built water tower here. I actually didn't wind up using this. I swapped this out for a N-scale water tower, but a dormer on here. These are plywood, roofing materials. So just to give you an idea, this thing's 20 inches in length, about 10 inches high. Particularly since I'm an ON30 narrow gauge, we typically model smaller buildings, just the way we do things. But this is a pretty large building, relatively. And I'll get to, there's some detail, show the roof detail, makes for a nice look. Here I goofed here. And I just put in a filler piece, and later I puttied this and painted this, and you wouldn't know that I made a mistake. So instead of it fitting flush like this one, I made a mistake, put in a filler piece, filled it with a plastic putty, sanded it. Nobody knows any different. As I pointed out earlier on this clapboard siding, if you're putting in windows, you have to cut out this clapboard. I cut that out so the windows will fit flush. More detail, roof detail. These are 2x8s sticking out. They're just pieces glued in there, but simulate the roof itself. Everything's trimmed out with it's like 1x6s I used here. Then we jump right to the painted building. Just jumps right out at you. This is my standard technique to paint a base color, scratch it with a wire brush, put a alcohol wash all over the building, and then go back with pan pastels with additional weathering here. I will go over what these materials are and what I used here, but the idea was to show this was the original color. Then when they added this building, they got a slightly different color. Same with this. So there's really 3 different colors in a brick. And this molding here is 1/4-inch molding from a dollhouse. It's a 1/4-inch scale dollhouse trim. This is a Scenic Express cast resin chimney. I checked, this is no longer made, but it has these grab irons in there so you can actually walk up it theoretically. Very nice casting, but I couldn't find it anymore. These are Wild West model shaped shingles. They look pretty fair in the photograph, but as you'll see at the end of the program, next week I'm gonna super detail this model, and I may paint these shingles over. We'll see schools out on that. This is a Bachmann N-scale water tower without its stand. This is the second time I've used one of these. It's my preferred way to do O-scale water towers, is to just use an N-scale water tower. Much faster and easier, and they're very detailed. And this is that Paper Creek tar paper roofing. At the time it was available. It's no longer available now. I do have master sheets. They're not in business anymore, but I can make as much as I need now. These are Grant Line windows and doors. This is simply paper towel glued on here, coated with, first painted with watercolor paint, and then just soaked in Elmer's glue and then stuck on the back of the windows. Makes for a nice window shade. And this is just brick paper that I found online. I just looked for Google search in a brick wall. And then I just printed it out on my inkjet printer, and then I either use rubber cement. I either use rubber cement or I use Elmer's glue and just glue it right on. It's a pretty nice looking building overall. This is the back of the building. Again, this is more of that brick paper. There's that resin casting. These are still available, I think, from Rusty Stumps, these two brick chimneys. Again, these are Grant Line windows, and I use my Ponce wheel to put in these nail holes. And I'm showing weathering below the windows. This is just pan pastels. These these posters are simply right off the internet, which I still practice today. Oh, the bar mills, excuse me, I said Rusty Stumps. The bar mills, age tall chimneys, they still make those. They're still available. And I'm going to have a series of close-ups here now. So that's a close-up of the first addition to the brewery. Gives you an idea of the weathering just by scratching it and putting on alcohol washes and pan pastels. It's just remarkable how little effort this really takes to get a look like that. There's that Bachman water tower. This railing here was made out of brass. I just soldered it up and then painted it, put it in place. I like to make these out of brass because make them out of wood, they're very delicate. Bump it or look at it the wrong way and they break. This is a nice touch that you can do. Instead of just filling your models with windows, take a little piece of plywood and, you know, make it look like you boarded one up. And there's another close-up of the detail of that weathering technique that it's really a three-step process, but I think it looks pretty remarkable for, it doesn't get any better than that. There's my paper towel window or window shade. This is just hit with dull coat and some pan pastels. There's a, I mean, this is magnified like 6 times, you know, but it holds up under the photograph. The Ponce wheel, the nails, pan pastels, the trim. I think you're looking at a real building. I maybe got a little too heavy with the mud on these doors. I'll probably go back. It's all water soluble. Take a little of this off. Nice little details you can add, like the flooring below the bump out.
God damn it, Dennis.
This is the side shed building. I don't really use the ship decking anymore. I just do it board by board now, but I'll leave this in place. Now, part of my, I'm probably going to go back and update the either reshingled. I don't really like these, to be honest with you. I don't like these shingles. I don't like the look of them. The coloring, the physical attributes of it are fine. So I think I can just paint them. I'm not, they look better in this photograph than they really are. The overall model again. Come along, learn something, see something on the U.S. Navy. That's my son there. He's Lieutenant Commander, oral surgeon in the Navy. So here he is, transformed into 1930. Just a couple old signs, you know. Yeah, there he is. Look at the detail of just scratching and a Ponce wheel. And, it's just one color, base color. It looks like I use a black alcohol wash and then little pan pastels here and there. There's those signs really exploded up. Rough on rats. A little humor there. I think this is the last time the Pirates won a World Series. Just joking. There it is on the new layout where it's going to be located. I've cut into the foam and that's where it's going to sit. But I'm going to go back and super detail this. I'm going to redo these roofs for next week. I'm going to put a Fort Pitt sign on here somewhere. There's going to be some railings. I'm going to have a platform here where the barrels are loaded on. This is a spur in front of this brewery. So I'm going to have a place where they can load barrels onto a boxcar. I think we put a couple of roof details on here. It fits really nicely in this spot. Anyway, that's it. So next week I'll super detail this thing and show you how I put it in place. And that's all I have for you this evening. Yep. Any questions?
It's a good idea on the brass railing instead of the plastic.
Doesn't take any time to do the brass. It's way stronger than plastic or wood.
Tom, the shiplap decking that you've used in the past, how is that different from scribed siding?
It's pre-glued. Get a close up here. You can't really see it. It comes pre-glued with a black glue, and it's expensive material now. It used to be fairly reasonable, but it's like $13 or $14 a sheet now. And to be honest, it's just too consistent for me now. I mean, at the time, it was a quick and easy way to do decking. And for a time, I did use it on my scratch builds. But then I thought it was just had too much of a manufactured look to it. So I quit using it for two reasons. One, I didn't like the look of it anymore. And two, it pretty much doubled in price. You can get it from Micromark. I forget which one of the lumber companies makes it. Might be Mount Out. I can't remember, but Micromark sells it for the same price that you can get it from the manufacturer. It comes in different widths. It comes in like 16th, 8th, quarter, 5/3, a whole bunch of different sizes. But it's expensive. I just don't use it anymore. Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Tom's right. It is expensive. That's why I stopped using it too. It just got out of my price range for what I was getting.
It just a little bit.
Thank you so much, Tom. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. So now I'm going to turn to Martin Breckbiel, MMR, for his scratch building corner. Martin, welcome.
Evening, Jim, and everyone else. Let's see if we can get this to behave. Oh my goodness, it is behaving. How unusual. Well, where were we? Oh, we haven't started yet, so I don't know where we are. We're going to start something new tonight. And I threatened or promised, take your choice, a rarity from me, an actual prototype car. This happens about once a decade in my shop, give or take a decade. I don't build very many prototype cars, loosely based upon, frequently, fictitious creations quite regularly, fanciful oddities even more frequently. But an actual prototype car, maybe 5 or 6 have come out of my shop in the last 20 years. So this will be a bit of an adventure. We're going to start with this. There's an article. I ran across this and I thought, well, that's a suitably strange or different and unusual car. It's not an oil tank car like those that used to be touted as oil cars in early Pennsylvania history, but this is a water car on the Uintah. And as they say in the first sentence, was an unusual railroad. So that immediately strikes home chords with me. If it's unusual, I find a place for it. And I thought, well, I should have one just for the fun of it. So we have upright wooden water tanks on a flat car. And I have a long-standing affinity for making barrels. There must have been a cooper in a prior life, once upon a time. Been making barrels and things of that nature all my life, actually. I rebuilt, well, I think one of the first things I ever rebuilt with a barrel was actually a butter churn, upright butter churn. So, so this is an old article. It's in Narrow Gauge Shortline Gazette. I was scanning them in because I'm clearing off that shelf out of my library because I've run out of shelf space. So something has to give. And this the pre-90s volunteered to vacate the premises, but that was after they went through the scanner. And I found, oh, there's an article and there's an article, and that looks silly. We might build one of those someday. I don't know when, but this one surfaced right at the top. So where do you start when you build something like this? Well, in the plumbing supplies, of all places, and I have no idea what this really is. Drain line, it was piece of drain line that was out in the shed up at my house in Pennsylvania, in the fire next to the firewood, the leftover from when I had the new plumbing lines and drain lines put in the bathroom and kitchen up there a couple of years ago. And this was a piece of leftover stuff. And I said, I should bring that home with me. I may find a use for this someday. And it was sitting in the corner of my shop in a rack. And I thought, that looks to be about the right size. And after measuring it versus one of my generic flat cars, I thought, that looks about right, give or take a little bit. And plus or minus a little bit, we can get away with that because there were no dimensions given in that plan. Or that, no plans in that article. There's just pictures and somebody built their own version of it. And so you sort of have you have a lot of freedom to just get creative and wing it. So, piece of plumbing. And you can buy this stuff at Home Depot in like a 2-foot length or in pre-cut to that. So you don't have to go and buy an 8-foot piece of tubing, which is actually useful to have if you want to build a lot of tank cars. But if you only want to build something small, well, you can get a 2-foot piece. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Maybe a couple of toes. Well, then what do? Well, you slice off 3 sections. You need 3 tanks. I did this on the bandsaw. Just roll it through the bandsaw. I have a 12-inch bandsaw with a 1/2-inch blade. Does a fairly decent job. Take your time and, like I said, I roll it through the blade. Still sanded flat and even. 60 grit paper on a hunk of 2x4, working it in a figure 8. You work it in a figure 8 so you end up getting a level surface. What my machinist 3 floors below me when I used to have a job taught me. Work it in a figure 8. It'll come out flat. Okay, that takes a little more coordination than most of us have, so I just do it clockwise, counterclockwise, and I go left-handed and do it counterclockwise and clockwise until I say, that's close enough, we'll stop there. Well, we got to put some boards on our pieces of plumbing. This is just 3x stock. I think it's 3x7s and maybe a stray 3x6 here and there to make it come out even. Just glue these on there. Set the first one with a square. Get it straight, top to bottom. And then it's CA, cyanoacrylate glue. You do a couple, let it set, do a couple, let it set, do a couple, let it set. I actually put them on there. They were a little long. And then I sanded them down on that same sanding block. And then you get a nice flush surface top and bottom. So you get a nice finish. And this makes a pretty sturdy barrel. They don't pop off very easily when you use the CA. And that's not basswood, actually. I think that's mainly pine. I got a bunch of pine lumber from Kapler before they changed hands. So we'll make some tops. Okay, this is just 3x stock, 3-inch stock. It's edge glued together. And I used a lot of scraps left over from doing the sides of the barrels. Just glue it all up. It's close to covering the top. Now we just have to shape it to the right dimensions. I didn't glue it on right away. In fact, didn't glue it on until very, very late. But so I just flip this over and take a pencil, mechanical pencil, 0.5 millimeter lead in it, and scribe a line, and then just sand it to that line. And I use a 4-inch upright belt sander, and then a sanding stick, and then a sanding block and sanding sponge until I say, well, that's round, or close enough to round that nobody's going to care. Okay, so there we have the tops. And we put some framing across them, as in the photos in that article. And there's a little hatch in the middle. This is all 3x stock again. And there's some 2x stock in making up the hatch. And that handle on that has that little open archway in it for reaching in there with your hand. You need a place to get a hold of it. And that's really easy to, actually, it's very easy to do. You just put the drum sander, a little drum sander in your Dremel, and just carve out a little handle. It's very easy to do. In O scale, it matches up. It's not quite right. For the it's wider than the actual drum, but just a little bit of sanding works fine. These tops aren't glued down yet either, by the way. And there's more pieces that go on there. Those are just the tops. There's other cross members that actually hold these on down. So they're still loose. They're just resting there, resting quietly, waiting for the inevitable, which will be probably glue and goo and CA and weights and more things. There's cross members that actually mount these to the car. And I think we'll probably end up doing that next week. And we will. We will do that next week because we need a flat car. We need a car to put these on. I can guarantee you I'm going to spend only one slide on a flat car, maybe two, because I talked about building a flat car about 300 times. But mounting the barrels is going to be a little more interesting. So we'll have fun with that. And that's where we're stopping for this week. So any questions? Scream now.
Any questions for Martin?
Martin, I noticed on the prototype car,
yeah,
it had those high glad hands on it.
Yes, it does.
Are you going to do that?
Yep. Those parts are actually available. Believe it or not, somebody actually sells those still. Unusual. It just makes an interesting final detail part on that car that makes it very unique looking. Now, not that the tanks themselves aren't unique enough, But those glad hands on the ends, if you read the article, it actually brings that point up, and apparently the people who worked on the Uintah thought that was totally normal. They were more of the mind that, doesn't everybody do that? And then it turns out, no, you're the only railroad that does that. You're unique. Apparently they were unique, at least. There may be others, I don't know them. But those parts are actually available as brass castings, and we can get them. We'll talk about those next week. Or the week after, or the week after that. I'm not sure. It depends how fast I go, or how much I procrastinate as I present.
Hey, Martin,
what was the diameter of the pipe you used?
Oh, bugger. I don't know. I'd have to go look it up. Well, it's either 2.25, 2.5, somewhere in that range. I actually, if you really wait for it, I'll go over to my shop and come back and let you know. I'll send you, I'll put it in the chat for you. I mean, I've still got enough laying back there somewhere.
Martin, I don't have a question, but I do have a little comment.
Yes, sir.
I also like to use that tubing when I make some sort of a tank car or something. And a while back, I invested in this tool that's used to cut that stuff. And you can buy them at Harbor Freight. They're pretty cheap. It looks like a big pair of pliers, but it's got a blade in it. And yeah, I think they'll cut up to like 1.5 inch tubing. And if you do that, I don't really have to sand it then. It cuts it off, really square, and I don't even have to sand after that.
Yeah, well, this tubing is closer to 2. This is at least 2 inches. So, and I already have invested in 40 years ago, invested in a bandsaw. So, it's sitting there it's literally right behind my chair at the one workstation in my shop. So I have to shove the chair out of the way to use it, but it's literally right there. So, you can cut that stuff with a bandsaw. You can cut it on a table saw if you really want to. You can cut plastic. You just have to be a little careful, but it's not impossible.
I take it with me to the home center to buy that stuff, and then I can fit it in the car. I cut it in half.
Yeah, well, I know they sell like 2-foot sections. So, if you want to be frugal and buy a 2-foot section, that's all you need. Or you can buy an 8-foot section and let it hang out the window and come home and make 10 tank cars.
Martin, thank you so very much. Look forward to.
I got to go measure a piece of pipe. I'll be back.
Got it. All right. Well, now I want to introduce Steve Sherrill. What do you want to talk about, Steve?
Well, thank you, Jim. Tonight we're going to talk about safety and modeling. We use a lot of tools that will actually hurt us. I'm sure many of us have had cuts, bruises, things like this. We use blade cutting tools. We use hobby knives. We use Dremel motor tools with cutoff wheels. We use saws, soldering irons, paint strippers, scissors, glues, choppers, things like this. Do we always put on our masks? Do we always have a proper blade disposal? Do we have safety glasses, which are very important, probably the most important thing you can use? And of course, do we have a fire extinguisher in case things really get bad? And do we have, of course, Band-Aids? I think some of this actually begins when we design our workshop. Now, Greg Cassidy just designed a new work area. And I've asked him to put a couple of pictures up, and then we're going to go into maybe some 3D printing safety. I've asked Bob Gelmacher to do a little bit on that. So, Greg, if you'll put that up. Are you still there?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is what I started with when I was first setting up a shop in my basement. And we have a poured concrete basement, and the walkout portion of it, they'd put up a lot of insulation on the wall. And I had my workshop set up, but it wasn't very appealing. I didn't have enough space. I couldn't put stuff on the wall in front of me. I moved everything out of the way, put up some strand board. I had help with some people who were doing some other work on our house when we were having the kitchen done. Then I went ahead and painted it, put my shelving up, so I finally had enough storage. Got my workbench back in place. And now I have a nice bright area with plenty of storage, so I don't have stuff stacked on top of boxes, and it's a lot easier to see stuff.
The lighting was important aspect of redesign, wasn't it? So you had plenty of light on your subject you were modeling.
Absolutely, because the other walls, that insulation and the dark, the backside of the wall that we had used when we finished the basement just sucked up all the light.
Do you keep the covers on your X-Acto knives, or are they just turned upside down?
I actually keep them in that little holder that you see right here. I have a piece of foam on the bottom of that, so I stick them in with the point down, and I've never really had a problem with that. Now, I do have scalpels, and you can see those right there. Those are held by magnets, so that those points never touch anything.
All right. Do you have a fire extinguisher?
No, I don't. I have one upstairs, but I don't have one down here. And when you mentioned that, I thought to myself, I don't have one down there. I do have a smoke detector down there, but not a fire extinguisher.
Okay. Where do you do your painting?
Over here to the left, I have another table with a paint booth for my airbrushing, and it has a hose that vents outside. If I'm using rattle cans, I'll typically take it out back unless it's the dread of winter and I really have to paint something.
Okay. You keep your Band-Aids handy? Safety glasses?
I do have masking tape, which I have used when I've cut myself.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice looking work area there.
Yeah, and I do have a mask and a set of glasses over at the spray booth. Depending on what I'm spraying. If I'm spraying an acrylic, I tend not to use them because it vents pretty well. But if I'm spraying a solvent, then I will put the mask on.
How do you dispose of your cutting blades?
Do you see this little can right here? It's actually the end of an International coffee can. I have a slit in the top of it, and all my blades go into that.
Okay.
And I've been filling it up for the last, I guess, 6 years, and it's just about to get full.
Wow. Wow, you're doing a lot of safe things there. Now, we also have 3D printing. And Bob Gelmacher, let me ask you a few questions. Bob?
Sure. Yep.
I know you're doing a lot of 3D printing, and the more you print, the more you have found out there are certain safety things that you need to be doing during the printing process that maybe you didn't do in the beginning. You want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, what I found is that especially with the resin printers, is when you first get into resin printing and you look at all the YouTubes that are out there, they always talk about wearing some kind of ventilation mask and also gloves and everything. And of course, I didn't want to pay any attention to any of that. And I found that was a real mistake. Not so much from the ventilation standpoint, because the printers that I have built-in charcoal filters. So I'm not getting that kind of smell or anything in the air. But I did find out that if you get the resin on your hands, and especially in the post-process where you're washing these resin prints in alcohol, is that too much exposure to alcohol, at least for me, actually blistered my hands.
and it took a couple of trips to a dermatologist in order to get that all squared away. So I really am a firm believer in wearing gloves. So whenever I'm back in the room where I do my resin printing, I always am wearing gloves no matter what I'm doing back there, just because I know what kind of damage I could do to my my hands. Now, I will add too that when I had that problem with the resin, with the alcohol in my hands, I wasn't as careful as I could have been when I went to the bathroom. Consequently, some of that alcohol and some of the resin rubbed off on other parts, and I had to discuss that with my female dermatologist, which we got through it, but it was embarrassing. The other thing, and not so much with the resin printing, but with the filament printers, and that's laying down a bead of plastic through something similar to a hot glue gun, is that the tip of that nozzle gets very, very hot. And I have a tendency sometimes to kind of pull off strings off of that nozzle, and you just have to be really careful because you can burn yourself. And the other thing is that, you know, when you're scratch building, you're right there. You got to be there with the materials. When we're doing a lot of other things with our model railroading, you got to be right there. But what I found is that because many times in printing, it could take 4, 6, 10 hours to complete a print. You get kind of lazy and you say, well, I'll go to bed and I'll pick it up in the morning. Well, it's not so much the safety for you, but it's the safety for your equipment. Because if something goes really bad about an hour into a 10-hour print, you can do some real damage to your equipment. A couple other things that I was listening to Greg, and is I've converted almost everything in my shop to LED lights. And that really, number one, it's probably cheaper to run. Number two, it's a lot cooler. But number three, it gives me a lot more light. And the other thing, and I found this the hard way, is hot glue guns. If you're not careful with those things, they can be real dangerous. And I burned myself really severely with a hot glue gun about a day after I had this new one. And that took another couple trips to the doctors. But anyway, safety has to play into all of this, no matter what tool that you're using.
One other thing that go ahead.
Bob, when you talk about wearing gloves, are there any special gloves that you wear? What kind of gloves are you talking about?
Well, it's basically exam gloves, and they recommend nitrile. And I've tried both latex rubber gloves and the nitrile gloves, and I'm not allergic to latex, so I can wear both, and they both seem to do the job pretty well. But I do have to be careful sometimes because I might try to reuse a pair of gloves multiple times, and every once in a while, let's say a thumb or a finger will break off of those, and all of a sudden I'm finding out that I've got this big hole of alcohol pouring through. But the two types that I use are latex and the nitrile.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Tom.
I had a kickback on my table saw 2 years ago when I was cutting plywood for my tortoise switches. You know, I have this technique where I basically super glue a piece of roughly 1/4-inch plywood below a turnout, and then I mount it to the foam. And I have the photos. I don't want to gross anybody out, but if you want to see just how bad things can get in model railroading, if you're not careful, I'll show you 4 quick slides. I butchered the shit out of my fingers.
Wow.
Oh,
that so
that's a lucky cut, Tom. I've seen much worse.
It was a trip to the emergency room, and I lost that fingernail, and it took a year to come back. And this one healed up pretty fast, but it in a way, I was fortunate. I could have lost a finger, I suppose, but I mean, it can be a dangerous hobby if you're not careful, you know. So anyway,
well, X-Acto knives falling out of your hands onto your thighs or something like that, they will go through your pants.
Yeah,
Especially.
Well, you know what, Tom, to piggyback on what you were just showing, when I was redoing my workshop, probably the most dangerous thing that I did, and is probably the most dangerous thing I've done in the last 6 months, was the shelves. I had to rip them down from 11 inches to 8 inches. I took my my little workmate out back. I clamped the shelves to the workmate. I drew my line. I got my circular saw, which is the only one I have, and I put on my eye protection, and I made sure there was nothing around me, and I went ahead and ripped those 2 shelves, and everything went fine. But the reason it was dangerous is because I don't do it very often. Now, I took a lot of precautions because of that, because it's not something that I'm accustomed to, and nothing went wrong. But still, the sound of that spinning blade, it puts fear in your heart.
I have used my table saw for probably 35 years, and I've had 2 kickbacks. One, the board hit me right in the belt, right in the stomach, but it didn't do anything. A little lower might have been a little exciting. And then just 2 years ago, ripping these little pieces of plywood, and the problem is they were too small, and they jacked in between the blade and the guide. And
Were you cutting narrow pieces with
Yes.
the rip blade? Yeah. What you got to do, the trick is you got to lock a piece of wood on the rip blade, get the 90-degree slide tool out, and you put the wood up against there, and you set it up so that it comes off of that before it goes into the blade. You hold the position on that, but you set it with the rip blade. But by the time it gets there, you don't have that other blade there. Yeah, you've got to be really careful. Anything you rip's got to be like 4 times the width.
Yeah.
Then you're safe. If you get down to where it's narrower, it's the width, the height is narrower than the width with a rip blade, you are just asking for trouble.
Yeah, precisely. That's
yeah.
exactly what I did. And I even the kick, I even knew better. Again,
no, I know. It's one of those things you think I can do it expeditiously. I'm really good, but when it catches, there's a lot of energy there. Yeah, no, that's one of those things I've learned. You put in that guide, clamp a piece of board that's 1/2 inch wide onto the rip blade.
I know the trick.
Yeah, exactly.
The piece that damaged my finger, I mean, it's perfectly fine now, but I kept that piece in my truck for 2 years just to remind me how stupid I was.
Tom, I make a lot of my own strip wood out of basswood.
Yeah.
And you get down to like 1/4 by 1/4 inch, and I've had it spear back at me and actually break the skin. I mean, that could have been really dangerous. But
when you did that, what kind of, using a micro mark table? So you're not using a big bad.
No, I have well, it's an old Sears table saw now, and it usually wants to take about 10-inch blades. But I found that by using the 10-inch blades, a lot of times I was turning as much wood into sawdust as I was actually getting a piece of wood that I could use. So I searched it out, and I found and I can't remember the name, but it's a red blade, and it's only about 7 inches in diameter, but has a
Red Devil.
Pardon me?
A Red Devil.
It might be, but it has a very, very fine, thin kerf, and it's like 60 teeth. And that gives me a really pretty good cut. But still, I have to be real careful because it'll flip back at me, and it's like a spear.
Yeah, that's what I have, is the old Sears cast iron table saw. And it's a beast. And again, I've had it for 35 years. I've only had 2 kickbacks, which is 2 kickbacks too many.
I've seen some people, and I think it was at a woodworking show, as it turns out, where his hand was so mangled, and he had all kind of braces on to keep his fingers in place, and it was in the healing process, but it looked terrible. Huh?
Yeah.
Dangerous tool. Dangerous tool.
Okay, Jim. Anybody else have anything they want to say or comments?
What's this? What's this?
Oh yeah, that's pretty bad.
So let's get away from the grotesque for a moment. So by the way, if you happen to go to a business Costco, the business Costco's sell the food gloves, and they're really thin and fine, but like for painting, they're great because you can use them. If you get paint on them, you just throw them away. You don't have to worry about it. You get 4,000. I think they're boxes of 1,000 each. You get 4 boxes for like $12.
What are
And
they,
you
Phil?
they're called food service gloves. They're the ones they use when you go get them a sandwich made. They put them on just for your sandwich. So you just throw them, but you can use them for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I use them in the kitchen when I cut a jalapeno, to dice up a jalapeno really fine to put in cream cheese, have a spicy cream cheese. If you get that stuff on your hands and you touch your eyes, you're dying. And you put those gloves on the hand that you hold jalapenos with, the knife hand you don't have to worry about, and you don't get to have that problem. So they're great in the kitchen. And like I said, for painting, they're great for painting because you just use them once. And if you get any paint on them or anything, take them off, throw them away, put another pair on.
Just one quick note: never wear gloves when you're using a power tool.
And Tom, it would be a real test of faith. Have you ever seen any of these table saws that they claim you can put a hot dog in it and it'll stop?
Yeah.
I don't want to try that. I have no faith in those things at all. Okay.
Your hand is a hot dog.
I have seen it, but as long as you're just extremely careful with your old timer table saw, you just like Phil hit it right in the nose. What I did, it's like he was there watching me or something.
We've all done it, but only some of us have major injury or significant injuries because of it. But, John showed us it's really easy to lose your balance, slip, have something happen, and have a major issue.
The worst thing I've ever had was I had a fairly small drill bit in my hand power drill, and I dropped it, and I instinctively tried to do a kick stop with my leg. Well, the drill just kept on going. And it stuck.
Well, Steve mentioned dropping the X-Acto knives. I swear to God, I must drop my X-Acto knife 2 or 3 times a week, and I react and I jump out of the way.
Yeah.
But it's going to stick me one of these times.
You only catch it with your foot once, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, you're so used to dropping little parts that you're working on, and you bring your legs together to try and catch it, and try to remember that that's a sharp thing that's coming down. You have to counter the muscle memory.
I think that model maker's apron now has a real appeal.
Yeah. Actually, that's probably not a bad idea.
It isn't a bad idea. You could have something that you just wore and have a little bit of Velcro you could clip up under the workbench and have a nice pocket there to catch everything, make it out of, kind of heavy-ish
watchmakers do it, so you probably get one on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. You probably could. That's actually not a bad idea at all if you're kind of sitting at a workbench, because
we were just talking about one of those. We were just talking about one of those in our club meeting last night. And the basic problem is 90% of the time something goes flying in a different direction, a spring or a piece that you're cutting off, and it'll go that way or that way or that way. And you're really lucky if it's going to go into your apron.
I'm more concerned with the X-Acto knife nabbing me. I think that's what we were after.
All the detail parts when you drop them have a total disregard for gravity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Every direction but down.
I don't need circumcised again.
All right.
Well, we got a little off topic here.
Too much information.
That's all. I think we've covered the subject here pretty well right now. And it's getting kind of late. So let me thank you so much, Steve, for doing that for us this evening. Look forward to seeing what you want to talk about next week. And Pat, if we could run the caboose now,
I think we're
I'm
about ready
okay.
to
I'm
close.
ready,
our
Nate
show.
Boy. Oops.
Well, folks, that's it for this show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really hope that you enjoyed what you were able to see tonight. Most importantly, hope you learned something. That's what it's all about. Best of modeling to you. Till next Wednesday. Thanks again for coming. Pat, Phil, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pat, did you kill the live feed?
Yeah, I did.
Cool.
I tried to, but I'm not the host.
I ended the stream. It's okay.
Just
It
end the
ended.
stream.